I get weirder, I feel like, in every video. I should be better at preparing. Hi there, my name is Amanda, and I have read some books recently that I just haven't talked about. So that would be the purpose of this video. Yeah. So I realized when I was gonna do a January wrap up that I didn't talk about the books that I read in December either. So this is gonna be December and January, especially because I only read a few books in December. So we're just gonna clump it all together. Okay, so in December, I finished the last two books in the Shadow and Bones trilogy. So Siege and Storm and, Siege and Storm and Ruin and Rising by Leigh Bardugo. If you don't know by now, you probably do, but if you don't know, this trilogy essentially follows this young girl named Alina. She lives in this world where there are people who are Grisha and have magical powers. Well, magical powers, I don't know how you would really describe the powers. It's magic, right? That's basically. And her and her best friend Mal are just in this world, and they are really just trying to survive, and they're trying to cross what is called the Fold, and it's essentially just this mass of darkness that was created so long ago, and in it there are like these insane creatures called the Volcra that will just kill you. And the story picks up basically when they are crossing this and they get attacked, and Alina discovers some things about herself, as do everybody else. Shortly after, she meets this character called the Darkling, which is the other really big character in this series that if you've heard about, you've definitely heard about the Darkling. And he essentially takes her under his wing, so to speak, and offers to mentor her and stuff. And that's the first book, and it just kind of takes off from there. It turns out, it's a whole world of amplifiers and tricks and intrigue and a little bit of drama. Really good. I think if I was going to order, my favorite Shadow and Bone is currently holding up those books, so not gonna take that down now. But I think it would be Shadow and Bone, Ruin and Rising, and Siege and Storm, which I think falls into the classic second book in a like YA dual or trilogy, where things that I don't like happen. Just talk to each other. I recommend it, especially with the new series coming out on Netflix. I have not read Six of Crows yet, but I am going to in February, I promise. I also have a whole video where I reviewed the Shadow and Bone trilogy. The next book that I finished in December, is Passenger by Alexandra Bracken. Of course I own this book. I just don't have it with me. And here's why. I was with one of my bosses who I'm very close with, and I'm very close with her son. I was over at their house because I do some independent side work in teaching, and we hadn't seen each other in so long because of COVID. Finally excited to see each other, and I was telling her about this book. I was like, I'm rereading this book. It's like one of my favorites. I'm loving it even more. I loved it even more the second time. And when I get really excited about something, and passionate, I talk really fast and I talk a lot about it, and I was just explaining things to her, and she's like, I want to read it. I want to read it. And I was like, okay. So I let her borrow it. That is how I got her and her son to watch every single MCU movie with me. I love this book. When I first read it, I believe in 2016, it was one of my favorite books. It instantly became one of my favorite books. This story is about a young woman named Etta who is a violinist that lives with her mom, who's a little put off and standoffish and a little bit distant from her. And she's just this very focused young woman who does what she has to do and has a goal and is doing the thing. And that thing for her is being a violinist. She's a very well-known, and I don't know if renowned is the right word, but like young violinist. She's very good. And when she is going to perform at the Met in New York, she is thrust into this world of time travel and pirates and adventures, and she meets Nicholas. It's wonderful. Passenger, I think, will always probably be one of my favorites for a few reasons, but the story is filled with so many things. I didn't know that I was gonna love time travel. I had never read a time travel book, but I love the way that time travel is handled in this and the way that Alexandra Bracken explains it and kind of how it all goes down. But essentially in this world, Etta meets this man named Nicholas. Nicholas is a pirate. Nicholas is the current literary love of my life, but he is a pirate on the ship that she wakes up in. And it takes off from there with Etta discovering, I don't want to give too many spoilers away, but it takes off from there with Etta discovering things about herself, of course, things about her mother, about her childhood, and about the world that she was just thrust into. It's also about her developing this whole relationship with this wonderful man and their journey together, discovering things about themselves and about the world. It also has really good commentary that is just kind of naturally woven through on like racism and sexism and homophobia throughout different time periods because, so they go to a bunch of different times. You get to see how they react to Etta, who is a white woman, and Nicholas, who is a black man. Also, you get the commentary from both of them, their thoughts, and as well as the expectations of each time, the way that even if it looks different, how it's still woven through each time period. I love the just natural conversations that happen. The romance is one of the only, I like romance in books. Like, it's not something that I focus on, but it is something that I enjoy in books. Like, yeah, like that's great. But there's almost never like a character, especially the men, that I would actually want to be with this person. But Nicholas! Anyway, that was a lot. Rereading this was incredible. It didn't make me love it any less. I actually tabbed it a whole bunch, which I'm going to put a picture right here. Anyway, Passenger is really, it's just a fun story about time travel, about family, about love, about, you know, nuances in society. It's about finding yourself and I don't know. I don't know if any other person sees it that way, but I freaking love it. A+, 10 out of 10, amazing. Okay, so the reason that I reread that mostly was because I wanted to read Wayfarer by Alexandra Bracken. This is the second book in the duology, the Passenger duology, and it essentially picks up right where Passenger ends. Passenger's ending is insane. It's crazy, unexpected, didn't like it, I cried a lot, but obviously not like I didn't like it. It's a duology, so like there was a little cliffhanger, you know what I mean? But so it picks up with this one, and it picks up kind of right where they left off, and at this point it is following Etta's journey and Nicholas's journey and trying to solve this really overwhelming crisis that they have going on. I don't know how to say anything. How do you talk about a sequel without spoiling anything? I can't. So what I will say is that I really enjoyed this. You know, obviously there were some parts of it that I was like, oh, I wish this was happening, but it was totally fine, especially for the story. Like, it felt like it needed to happen. I really trusted the process with this because I trust Alexandra Bracken as a writer. I'm gonna say that. I tabbed this up too. I'm not a tabber, so I don't even know where this came from, but I tabbed it all up. I loved it. This definitely gets an A+ for me too. It's a sequel. There's only so much I can say, but I will say that I loved the characters in this. I loved getting to dive deeper into different characters that, you know, were always side characters, but in this we see so much more of them. It was just so much fun. It was heart-wrenching. I cried. You guys, this gave me a huge book hangover. I mean a terrible book hangover. Like, I didn't pick up another book for like 3 days. I cried. I was like, I text my friend. I was like, Tori, I'm never reading again. She's like, you take that back right now. And I went on this whole rant. I was like, I can't do it. Like, how am I supposed to read another book? I love this duology so much. I love this world. I love these characters. I love Etta. I saw a lot of myself in Etta. I love Nicholas. He's incredible. I loved all of the side characters. I loved the story. I loved the resolution. I love it. I just love Alexandra Bracken. Like, I like Alexandra Bracken's writing. I love her characters. I love her resolutions. Like, spoiler alert, for February, I finished this morning. Woo! Anyway, highly recommend. This gets an A+. I love this duology. It'll probably be one of my favorites forever. I will probably reread it again soon. I don't know. I love it. I love it with my whole heart. I was actually supposed to have an interview right now, but it got postponed to next Friday, so good for us. Okay, so now we're gonna talk about the books that I read in January. Hopefully this video is not crazy long, but January was the best reading month that I have ever had in my entire life. However, it may have been very disappointing for the rest of you. Throughout my life, even in like my prime of reading, like, you know, like late high school and my first semester of college and like that summer in between, I was reading quite a bit. But I've never read more than like 4 books in a month, really. And usually I was always rereading books. I've always been a big rereader, and especially then I was just like rereading all the books that I loved so much. Like Twilight, which I have since tried to reread. It didn't go over well, but it will always hold a special place in my heart despite all of its problems. But so this month, I read 6 books. Again, I know that's not crazy. And if you're watching literally any other booktuber on here, you're like, they read 6 books a minute. And I'm like, I know. But for me, reading 6 books felt really good. I'm just, especially with the way my life is right now, with all of the working and the studying and all of it. I was really proud of myself for finishing 6 books. So I'm excited about it. Hopefully I'll read more this month. I don't know. I might not. But that's okay because I love to read, and reading 6 books in a month is still incredible. That's more than a book a week. If you read that or even less, congratulations. Okay, let's talk about them. The first book that I finished in January is called How to Argue with the Racist by Adam Rutherford. This book I actually saw. I was at Barnes & Noble because that's one of my jobs is I'm a bookseller at Barnes & Noble, and I was just putting books away, and this wasn't even anywhere near them, but it caught my eye, and I was like, what's that? So then naturally I bought it and I started reading it on my break. Anyway, this book is all about using science and reason and logic to argue with people about racism and to break down the ideas behind them and behind when somebody uses pseudoscience or fake science or their own weird reasoning that they claim is science even though it's not science. Science is a reliable thing. Anyway, the whole book is about using those things, about taking them, breaking them down, and then completely proving each one of those claims wrong. If you are new to dismantling these ideas on your own, I think this book would be really useful. It also just goes into a larger conversation of genetics and explaining genetics in a way that feels more accessible so that they can understand better, and it helps him to make his points in this book. Highly recommend this book for anybody really, but especially if you're looking for these solid arguments to use against people when you're having these conversations with people. The next book that I read this month is No Exit by Taylor Adams. This book I picked up because one of my coworkers was like, hey, do you like psychological thrillers? And I was like, oh, I haven't read that many, but yeah, I'm open to anything. And she was like, here, do you want this? And I was like, oh, do you not want it? She's like, no, I loved it, but I always give away my books. And I was like, she always gives away her books, she's just the sweetest lady. I read this pretty quickly. So this book is about a woman who is driving to go see her mother because she just found out that her mother is sick. So she's driving from school. She's like 18, I think, driving from school to her home to see her mother. And she gets stuck in this crazy snowstorm. And because of the snowstorm, she's forced to pull her, crappy beat up car into this rest stop where there are several other people there at the rest stop. They all know they're going to be stuck there for a while, so she's just like hanging out with them, and she's trying to get a signal on her phone so that she can send a message to her sister about what's going on and ask about how her mom is doing, because this was pretty unexpected, her illness. And while Darby, that's her name, is following the advice of one of the other people that is with her, is trying to find a signal. She loops back around before going back into the building, and she finds a young girl that has been abducted in the back of a van. And this story is about her trying to figure out whose van it is, who took this child, what's going on, and a whole bunch of really interesting and weird psychological things. I really hate explaining books because when I go into a book, I don't want to know anything, but I know that's not what everybody wants. So this book was really good. I feel like it was like an interesting perspective because I've seen a lot of things like that. You know what I mean? Like I've seen stories play out this way, and there were certain things that sure, I was able to kind of guess would happen, but it didn't take away from the story for me, I don't think. In the end, I really did not expect what happened to happen. So I don't know. I thought it was really good and really interesting, and I was freaked out much of the time because I would typically read it at night, and then I would just stare around the room, trying to make sure my eyes were focused enough that I could see if anybody was in there trying to kill me. I would give this book an A-. The next book that I read this month is called The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. I'm not sure if that's how you say his name. I'm sorry if I pronounced it wrong. This is obviously not the book. The reason I'm holding up my Kindle is because my brother got me this for Christmas. He got me a new Kindle for Christmas. How sweet is that? Anyway, so I borrowed it from Libby, the library app that you can borrow books from, like ebooks and audiobooks, and I read it as an ebook. So this book was really good. So The Silent Patient follows this young woman who, what we know about her is that she was found in her house with her husband murdered, with her wrist slit and standing near him while he's tied up. And then the story picks up 6 years later, and she hasn't spoken since. She's silent. She has not talked since the instance, whatever had occurred that night. So it follows her story, utilizing her journals and her paintings as she's a painting. As she's a painter. And the psychotherapist who takes a special interest in her case and begins working with her to try to get her to speak. His goal is to get her to speak. That's all I'm going to say about this. I went in knowing literally nothing. I'm so glad that I went in knowing literally nothing. It was really good because basically what we get to do is go on this journey learning about Alicia and her life while also learning about the psychotherapist and how their stories are similar in some ways in the personal turmoils that they've gone through and how their stories weave together, and with them each finding themselves and going through their trauma and their experiences and discovering who they are while also... Whoa. This was interesting. I'm pretty sure it's a psychological thriller. It was really good. I liked it. I was freaked out while I was reading it. I just kept wanting to know what was going to happen. I wanted to know what happened that night. I wanted to know what had happened to Alicia in her childhood. I wanted to know everything. It was so good. I read it so quickly in like a few days. Recommend it if you're interested. I think it's getting, a lot of people have really liked it. I'm giving it an A-. A lot of people have really liked it that I've read it. I've seen some, like, you know, people say that they didn't like it, but that always happens with books, so whatever. The next book that I finished in the month of January, I listened to on Libby as well as an audiobook, and that was Greenlights by Matthew McConaughey. I'm gonna be honest, if you didn't expect it, imagine how I feel. I only picked this up because my boss, well, she's not my boss anymore. I left one of my jobs recently, and my boss had read it and loved it. She just like randomly picked up, she listened to it, she said it was incredible. And I was like, okay, I'll give it a chance. Okay, I believe you, because we're basically the same person and like the same thing. So it was great. This was good. This was really good. I enjoyed listening to Matthew McConaughey's life. I'm gonna be honest. I had to examine some of my own biases while reading this because I just didn't expect Matthew McConaughey's life or thoughts to be what is in here. Matthew McConaughey's life in general was wild. His childhood was really interesting. He's had so many bizarre experiences in his life, but also so many just wonderful, enlightening experiences. He's very self-reflective, and there were so many things in this book that I was like, you're doing these things that I've only ever dreamt of doing my entire life. You have these experiences that I've always wanted to, and while the reason he goes on them is like for self-reflective purposes, and he comes to a lot of points and thoughts that I've already processed as a person myself, but I still want to do these things. Okay, so I think the best thing for me to do is just read you my Goodreads review because it was just what I was feeling in the moment, and I feel like it works. My favorite stories are the ones that I may see myself in, but also challenge the philosophies I have in my perception of what I think the story will be, my bias towards what I'm about to read before I read it. Some was what I expected, most was not, but it was all relative. Wow, this was fun. That was my Goodreads review. That's how I feel about this book. A, and I will be watching every Matthew McConaughey movie. You know that. You know I need to. Okay, I discovered something weird that I have to tell you. I have found a weird connection between The Silent Patient and Greenlight. I know. Here it is. So in The Silent Patient, one of the things that he discovers is that when the psychotherapist is reading her journals, he's talking about how she starts to get more like unhinged, and like her writing is clearly like rambly, and there's like arrows and doodles and connections and stuff. And I was like, oh my God, like that's me. That's what I look like. I'm like, oh gosh, okay, whatever, we're letting it go. Then I'm listening to Greenlights, and he talks about how there's like this period of time where he literally would write 14 pages of nonsense to like send to his friends and to send to his loved ones. And he would just like write his thoughts. And then I was like, oh my God. Then I got to this moment where I was like, okay, so am I on the brink of psychosis, or am I Matthew McConaughey? Both? In between? Is there a way for them to exist together? I believe there is. It's me. And the last book that I read in the month of January is called Braving the Wilderness by Brene Brown. I've always enjoyed Brene Brown, especially as somebody who has a bachelor's of science in psychology. She's very prominent in the social sciences, and I've always liked her work. I've watched her video on empathy on YouTube a million times. I watched her TED Talk. I've always really liked her. I think that she's a really interesting person. I think that her work is crucial. But so what happened was I was working at Barnes & Noble, and I was covering the front register, which I almost never do, and I was just walking around, I was bored, and I just started reading this book. And I read the first like 20 pages so fast and had already cried that I was like, well, now I have to read this book. This book, really, it's all about like the quest, like it's called The Quest for True Belonging and the Courage to Stand Alone. And similarly to Greenlights, so much of this, you know, there are things, again, as a psych major, you're kind of forced to look inward. You're really forced to think about yourself, think about these things, and process yourself. So a lot of the things that she was talking about in here, while I'd already gone through them, I feel like they were still important to discuss, to remember, to think about. You know, even though she's already at these points, or she's talking about getting yourself to this place, it's still important. And there were still so many things in here that were beneficial to me, especially, you know, the point about having the courage to stand alone. As somebody who's always kind of been the black sheep, especially socially in the family, this was beneficial. I liked it. It was good. There were some things that I wonder if, she wrote this like 2 or 3 years ago. I wonder if she would write them differently now that it's 2021 and other things have happened. But I believe she's written some other books since then, and that she has like commissioned other people to write some books. So I'll probably continue reading her stuff because I also related a lot to her in this weird way. There was this one part where she talks about how when she gets really passionate or excited about things, that the people around her call it the Brene wind tunnel. that they're just like sucked into this thing. And I like, when I was reading that, I walked into the living room to my sister and I was like, when I get really excited, do I? And then I walked out. And then a few hours later, I picked the conversation back up at Target. And I only remember that so deeply because she reminds me of it because it was so weird to her. But also she was like, yeah, that's you. So those are all the books that I read in January and December. Obviously, it's not that many books compared to like, you know, the overarching community, but I loved them all. I genuinely enjoyed them all. It's pretty hard for me to not like a book. Except for Uprooted by Naomi Novik. Ugh, whatever. I thought that they were all good. They were all interesting. You know, they all had their moments. So that's all, folks. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. If you made it this far, I don't know at this point, I'm just rambling to myself. I hope you have a wonderful day, night, whatever, whenever you're watching this. I hope you're staying safe, wash your hands, social distance, wear a mask, and do all of the things. You're amazing. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys soon.